if we had traded time for money, if we had billed by the hour, we would have made significantly less money. All right, welcome. My name's Chris Guyman. I'm the Time Freedom Lawyer, and today we're going to be talking about value. Specifically, we're going to talk about what you can do to create massive amounts of value in your practice so that clients are willing to pay for the services that you're doing. So I did a little intro before, and so some of this is going to be a repeat for the people who were here already, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So I want to talk about what is the perfect business. The perfect business is where the client receives significantly more than what they pay for, and it costs you significantly less to deliver that to them, right? So if I was using my hands and showing this, right? If the client received $10,000 worth of value and you only charged them $1,000, that would be awesome for them, right? Anybody I think here would make the trade of getting 10,000 for 1,000, right? And if that costs you only $100 to deliver it, right? They would receive 10 times the value of what they paid for, and it would cost you 10 times less than what they paid. So everybody here would win. And I want you to think of business this way, because you should win as the owner of a business, the one taking the risk and delivering valuable services to people. You should win and get paid for that. And your client should win, right? At the end of the day, a lot of the times when we talk about money and charging more or doing more or these types of things, the number one objection I get is that, well, my clients can't afford that. Or, I can't in good conscience charge these people that much. And I get that. And I 100% agree. You should never charge more for your services than what it's worth to them, right? And if they can get the exact same thing somewhere else for less money, they should. Right? If you're delivering the exact same service that someone else is and someone else is paying less, your clients should go pay that person less. But that's not the case, right? And that's really easy to talk about when we're selling widgets, right? If you have a brown bouncy ball and they have a brown bouncy ball and it's the same brown bouncy ball, then if yours is $2 and the other person's is $1, everybody should, if they are smart, pay $1 for it. However, services are not that easy, right? You can't say my services are worth 10,000. That's what makes legal services difficult to express value in, is that it's very hard to put a dollar amount to it. However, if you can help your clients understand the value, you are going to be ahead of everyone else. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is how do we, one, make our services more valuable, deliver more good things to our clients, and two, how do we communicate that with them? Because they're out there searching for who can help them the best, right? And who can give them the most value. And they may not even be able to quantify that and say it in words, but that's what they want. They want to feel like they're getting a good deal. And they don't always understand or know if it's a good deal or not. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So to build on this, where we're going to start is, I want to start with a story. And I love stories. I love telling stories. And I want to make sure that this hits home for you, right? So with this, we recently had a case a couple of months ago where someone called up, and I actually happened to take the sales call, so I know a little bit more about this case than I normally would. But he had a very complicated situation. So for those who don't know, we own a family law practice. Like, what we hold out to the public is that we do family law. That's the only thing we tell people: divorce, custody, adoptions, and guardianships. Well, he calls us up, and his ex-wife had made allegations of, soon to be ex-wife, had made allegations of abuse against him falsely. She had been informed that if she had a protective order against him, she would get the house and these things, and she wanted those things. And I don't blame her for doing that. I get it. I do a free clinic at CAPSA, so the local abuse shelter here. So I've seen this lots of times. They're in bad situations and they make bad choices. But it doesn't change the fact that she made false allegations against him for abuse, and there was a protective order against him. There was also criminal charges against him based on the allegations that she had made. And so he comes to us and he's like, look, I want to get divorced. I want to have time with my kids, and I just want this stuff to go away. I'm like, awesome. I can stand behind that. But with that, normally our fee for just a non-contested divorce is about $6,500. But because of these other things that were going on, we stuck him into a service where he actually will represent you for everything related to a specific incident for a specific price. And in this case, it was about 12 grand for up to 6 months worth of services and everything in relationship to this domestic violence charge as well as the divorce. So we kind of bundled everything together. We can talk about how to structure flat fees in a little bit. If that's something you're interested in, just let me know in the chat that you want to know about how to structure flat fees, and we can talk about that on the second half. But we set this up so that we could make sure that he was taken care of. And he gets a discount for paying up in full up front. And so he does that, ends up paying about $10,800. My team then now has this money, and we're like, all right, how do we deliver the results that he wants? How do we, one, help him get divorced, two, help him get the protective order dismissed, and three, help him get the criminal charges dismissed? So we jump through, we do some math, and we make a plan. Because we are motivated to deliver on the results as efficiently as possible, we only get paid the flat amount, right? We want to be efficient. So we work through, we create a plan, and we go to action. We end up settling this divorce case using that settlement to get the protective order dismissed. And then when the protective order was dismissed, the criminal court agreed to dismiss they actually did a plea in abeyance on the criminal charges. And he had, 6 months and he was taken care of. So we were able to do all of that by strategizing this. And this isn't a lesson on how to dismiss protective orders and stuff, right? So I'm going simple on this, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of how this worked, right? But what's cool here is the attorney that was working for me on this case, he got done with the plea in abeyance hearing recently, and he had been billing like our normal a la carte pricing against that retainer each time he did something to see how far we are into it. And he gets done with the plea in abeyance and he's like, hey, I just got done with this and we still have $5 grand in trust. What do we do? And the answer is we charged a flat fee, right? So now that all of the services are done, we bill the remainder at the end. And he was kind of, he was excited, but also like apprehensive. Like, did we earn everything that we've been paid, right? And that's a big thing. We talk about this a lot in our firm, making sure we earn the stuff that we charge people for. And so we did an analysis. And what was really cool is this client, we had an opportunity to talk to him, and he was so stoked. He's like, I can't believe that I was able to come to your office and in one sitting with one person, you solved all of my problems. And I knew exactly how much it was going to cost. I could not have done that anywhere else. And he'd had enough experience with attorneys. The reason we did a plea in abeyance is he had some criminal stuff in the past that there's a reason why the allegations stuck, right? They weren't true in this situation, but it's not like he had clean hands. So he'd worked with attorneys in the past, and he had worked with attorneys in the past to the point where, he'd start with $1,500 retainers and then it would be $5 grand. And he was totally expecting when he met with us, the fact that we were handling 3 things for him that would be really expensive. He straight up said, he's like, I figured it would be at least $15,000, if not $20,000 in attorney's fees to get everything taken care of. So the fact that it was a flat fee of $10,800, he was stoked. So grateful for that opportunity. So grateful for the certainty that came out of it. So grateful for the outcome that came out of it. And we were able to get him done in just a couple of months. My team was also grateful though, right? When they ran through it and realized how much time they had spent. If we had traded time for money, if we had billed by the hour, we would have made significantly less money. But all of this was possible because we started with the value conversation. What is it worth to the client to have these problems solved? And instead of thinking about how much time it was going to take us, we focused on the client. And that's the key here. If you only get one thing from this lesson, it is focusing on the client. So we focused on the client and we figured out what outcome they wanted. And then instead of thinking about how we would normally solve this case, we asked ourselves, how do we give this client this desired outcome as quickly as possible? And the cool thing about legal fees, and I have yet to work with somebody in any practice area in the law, that when we got in and started figuring out how to do things efficiently, that there weren't significantly a lot of options to become more efficient. The legal industry as a whole is incredibly inefficient. And the reason for that is the billable hour. And we'll talk about that more in a second. But by asking ourselves that question, how do we do this as quickly as possible? we were able to deliver massive results for the client. And I think that getting an outcome faster in and of itself is valuable. But we were able to do so in so much less time. I figure that my attorneys in this case earned about twice as much per hour as the average attorney would in our area, all by focusing on value. So I hope that's inspiring to those who are here. And if you want to make more money in less time, I hope you say so and let me know in the comments below that that's something you're interested in. And I want you to be able to do that by providing more to the client than ever before. So if anybody walks away from this thinking that all I said was charge your clients more and do less work, I'm going to be so mad, because that's not what it is. So how do you do that, right? And if you have ideas on this, I'd love to hear what your ideas are. But I want to ask and propose this question to you. How do you solve your clients' problems as effectively as possible? How do you, and I'm saying you as in the person looking at me, even if you're watching this not live, if you're watching this on a recording, you can still put comments in the chat. Wherever you're watching this, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or any of the other platforms, I watch those comments and I will respond. So I want to know, what do you do to provide massive value to your clients? What do you do to solve their problems? Please let me know. While you're thinking of that and commenting, I'm going to talk about what we do. So in the marketing world, we have what's called offer creation. An offer is, simply put, just the marketing message that you use. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of great material on how to do offers. And so I'm not going to go into a ton of depth on that here, but what it really comes down to is 3 questions. Who's your ideal client? What problem do they have? And how can you solve that problem? And with us, what we ended up doing was really spending some time asking ourselves, who is our ideal client? Who are the people that we want to work with? And who do we want to build the foundation of our income on, right? There's a difference between who do you want to serve and who is your ideal client. Clients are the people who pay, right? At the end of the day, for a business to exist, there has to be cash flow. So your ideal client is someone who pays for your services. And we had to realize as a law firm that ideally we wanted to serve victims of domestic violence, specifically protect children from domestic abuse. But our ideal client was similar, but it's parents who are protecting children. And we noticed that specifically in the divorce realm, that people were a lot more willing to spend money when it came to protecting their children. Obviously, rightfully so, right? If you're just fighting over money, then you should spend as little money as possible so that the pie is bigger. But when it comes to protecting a child, that's worth spending some money to do. And we're really good at that. That's something we're also good at, and we can solve that problem very effectively. So that's what we ended up building our ideal client around, was parents who needed to protect their children. So that was our ideal client. Then we had to ask, what problem do they have, right? The answer to this question of how do you solve your client's problems is, first, understanding who your client is, and second, really thinking about what it is they want. Now, we call it a problem, but what that really means is, like, what's their desired outcome? Now, from a sales standpoint, from a delivery standpoint, you're always going to get paid more to solve problems and remove pain than you are to take someone from happy to happier. A lot of people aren't willing to pay to go from happy to happier, where if you can prevent pain or remove pain, they're willing to pay for that. And so again, as a foundation of your law firm, you need to start there. And so we really spent some time thinking about what our clients wanted. And I have another story here that kind of helps drive this home. And recently I was working with somebody and he was helping people with traffic tickets. And previously their company had done it. And what they were doing is they were trying to save people money. Like, a traffic ticket costs you this much, having, these points on your record costs this much. And effectively, if you pay us $200, we can remove your traffic ticket or simplify things for you so that you don't pay this extra money. But it wasn't a lot. Really, the most that they could pay someone could pay this law firm in order to save money was about $200. Well, it wasn't worth it to this attorney to do it for $200. So he spent some more time. He was thinking about his ideal client, and it was a part of a bigger conversation that we had. But once he identified his ideal client, he realized that time was really important to these people. Doctors, dentists, professionals, people who can't take time out of their workday to go do this. And those people were willing to pay about $1,500 to protect their time and to prevent the inconvenience of the traffic ticket. So he changed his offer, and that's what he started talking about. He stopped talking about saving people money, and he started talking about saving other people, his ideal clients, time and convenience. And he actually now has more people hiring him than he had before, and they're paying $1,500 instead of $200. He's able to batch those things into where it's a very efficient process for him. The clients are happy because they get what they wanted, and he's happy because he got paid 7 times as much money as he was getting paid before. So again, it's not the work that you're doing. And that's where, again, we as attorneys, we get so caught up in how many hours we're spending. Don't try to break that, okay? And really think about what the client wants. And not all clients want the same thing, right? Like if I do like a temporary restraining order, an emergency injunction in this case, right? If someone has kidnapped their child and taken them to Egypt, how much is that worth to the parent trying to get their kid back, right? Non-extradition country. This is a real story. That's a very valuable service, right? Trying to get a kid out of a non-extradition country. Where if your ex is 15 minutes late for picking up their kid, how much is that worth, right? It's the exact same amount of work, the same number of hours for me to draft a motion. But to one person, it's worth $50,000, and to another person, it's worth $10. So instead of focusing on how much time it took me, we focus on what's the outcome to the person. And we then build our practice around the people who value our services at more money. So that's that second question. What problem do they have? And then the last question is, how do we solve it? So that's where the question of how much time does it take us to do these things, right? Because we have to answer the question of how much is it worth to somebody and how much are you going to charge them? And then the last answer is, how much does it cost you to deliver it? Now, the value to your client doesn't change just because the cost to you goes down. So how you become a good business is by changing the gap between how much they pay and how much it costs you. So the only way to do that is to either charge more, which is painful to your client, or to reduce the cost, which is always going to be my preferred method, right? If we can reduce the amount of time that we spend on things, since most of our employees are paid by the hour, if I reduce the amount of time they spend, I reduce the amount of cost to me. But as long as reducing the amount of time that they spend on something doesn't lower the value that the client receives, then that's a good business choice. So long as it also doesn't reduce the price, right? You can start to see why I talk so much about value instead of billing by the hour, is because in a traditional model, the client pays more or less based off of how much time your team spends. And so it's almost impossible to make a gap between the price to you and the cost to them without just raising the price on them. But if we get away from that and focus on value and fix the price, then we can start playing with the efficiencies without hurting the client. So that's the last step. How do we solve it? And that's where you create an offer, right? We've got a lot of resources out there on how to become more valuable to people. That's a lesson for another day. I could spend 4 hours talking about that, but I want for today, the take home to be the focus on the value. So we have a couple of questions about this, and I want to take an opportunity right now to answer some of those questions. So I'm going to pull those up right now. And Amy asked, she said, so I implemented what you taught last week about the plan of assistants doing admin work, and most of the communication and attorneys do work of drafting, research, etc. We're already doing that, but not quite so consciously with intent. My client responded that they think that's double dipping and the staff tome should be included in the attorney's fees, and now texts and calls me directly at all hours. This is rare for me. I usually do a much better job with client management. This is obviously helping to define my ideal client too. How would you respond to the client's feedback? This is a really good question. So, part of this is going to be managing the client's expectations on the front side, right? What I have found, and it's probably one of my favorite tricks, is I charge my paralegals at 1/2, and all of my support staff, in fact, at 1/2 the cost of the attorneys. This is often more than what most people charge. And in fact, if you're watching this, I would love to know what percentage of your fees your paralegals are compared to your rate. But what I have found is if I'm billing at $500 an hour, and I used to have my paralegals at $150 an hour, if I bump them to $250, so I'm actually going to raise the fee here, but it's 1/2 of my hourly rate. What I tell clients is, hey, look, I understand my time is expensive, which is why I have support staff, and their fees are 1/2 of my fee. And so whenever possible, I'm going to have my team do as much work as possible, because then you're not paying for me to stuff an envelope, right? If at all possible, we're going to have someone else do that work, not so that it affects the outcome, right? If it's legal advice or those types of things where you need an attorney, I'm obviously going to do it. But I think you're willing to pay my hourly rate to provide legal advice. You probably don't want to pay my hourly rate to put a letter in an envelope. And I use the stuffing envelopes as my example almost every time because it makes the most sense. Communication is another great example here. And that's the conversation that you want to have with the client, is especially Amy, it sounds like you're billing by the hour in this situation, right? Is you want to say, hey, look, I get it. But what you contracted with my office is to pay by the hour. And what I would like to do is save you money. Okay. So yes, I charge for my team's time because I could do it, right? You want me to do it? You want to email me directly and I email you? That's X price. But if it's a simple answer that my team can answer, then it looks like your fee is 40% of what your staff's fee is 40% of your fee. You can say, look, whenever possible, I'm going to have my staff do it so that you only pay 40% of the cost. And I think once they see that, they're going to see, like, in this situation, the bargain for exchange is time. And you understand and acknowledge that not all tasks are created equal, right? You going into court and saving them $10,000 on a case, they'll pay $500 an hour for that every time. But they probably don't want to pay $500 an hour to stuff an envelope. And so you have considered that already for them, and therefore you have your team do it. Now, what about contingency fee? Contingency fees are one of my favorite because just like a flat fee, the fee is fixed. And so you should use your staff and team and efficiencies and ChatGPT and whatever other resources you want out there, because you're still motivated to get them as good of a result as possible, right? You're not going to do something like have ChatGPT draft a response that sucks, and then all of a sudden they get less money, right? Because then you get less money. So you're motivated to deliver massive value to the client because your pay is also contingent on the massive value you provide. So I love contingency fees because it motivates you and your client to be headed in the same direction at the same time while encouraging efficiency, right? Because every time your team or ChatGPT or something else can do the stuff, you're going to do it because you get paid the same, right? So, but it really is spending some time thinking about the value. And then the second half of this is exactly, and that's why I'm glad you asked this question, Amy, is how do you communicate that to your clients? Because just because you've done the math doesn't mean they've done the math, right? And I guarantee they don't understand what we're talking about here. Unless your client is a habitual hirer of attorneys and has dealt with lots of attorneys and dealt with the good attorneys and the bad, they're not going to understand how good they have it at your firm. And I get this all the time. Okay. We respond to messages often within an hour, almost always. Now, is it the attorney who responds? No, it's always my team. I've got somebody whose entire job is responding to client messages as quickly as possible, which is unheard of, right? I think everybody here, and you don't have to admit this if you don't want to, but I bet your response rate is 24 hours. I bet there are plenty of emails that go unanswered for 3, 4, 5 days, depending on how busy you are. That doesn't happen here. And the clients don't know that, right? They don't know how good they've got it unless you tell them. So the number one bar complaint against attorneys is lack of communication. And So use that. Tell them tons of stuff and break it up into little bitty pieces. So our representation agreement, a couple pages long, it talks all about our communication practices. I just assume no one reads it, right? And so the same stuff that's in our representation agreement, we trickle out to them in emails. Hey, now that you're one of our clients, I know that clients' biggest frustration is communication. Just wanted to remind you what our communication systems are in this case, in our firm, right? Then I take the other things, the payments, all those types of things. We just trickle that out to them. What does that do? One, clients are stoked. They keep getting emails from me. Every single time they get an email from me, they think I'm thinking about them. And I can create a system so that those automatically get sent. And so I don't have to worry about the work behind it, right? So costs me less to do and provides them more value. And it sets these expectations. So we can go in and we can say these things. Hey, just as a reminder, how we do things here is, now our fees are flat. So we just go in straight up say, hey, look, we have set our fee and we set our $6,500 fee. It's straight up a limited scope representation. We tell them from the very beginning, like we are limited to doing these things. When there's a very, very good chance that the things we have in this package are going to solve your problem. And I love the word and. I very rarely use but. I try to use and every single time I can. And there is a chance that it's going to be more money. If you ask us to do more work, there's an additional fee. If there are things that come up that the court asks us to do additional work, there also has to be an additional fee. But we're going to do what we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I just put that straight out there from the very beginning. My goal is to save you money. Here's what's cool, right? Then the client blows you up. My son of a BX was 15 minutes late, nail his ass to the stand, right? I had someone specifically say that, nail his butt to the stand, right? Sweet. I can do that. He was, in this case, in violation of their court order. Who here thinks that a judge is going to throw this guy in jail for being 15 minutes late? Anyone? No? Right? Of course not, right? He is in contempt, but the punishment for being 15 minutes late is going to be nominal. It doesn't change the fact that if I do a motion to enforce, I have to do about $3,500 worth of work. And I'm going to charge that, right? Just because the value to the client is very little in this situation doesn't change the fact that how much my services charge or cost. And so with that, I had that conversation with them. Happy to. We can do a motion to enforce. The cost of a motion to enforce is an additional $3,500. And then I should have said, in my opinion, the court's probably just going to slap him on the hand because he's only 15 minutes late and this is his first offense. So it's probably not worth that. But you tell me, is this worth it to you, right? I don't decide what's valuable to my client. I don't know, because this isn't a fixed, you get $10,000. I don't know. Maybe this person is really passionate about it and it's worth it to them. And they think it's worth $10,000. Obviously, in this case, I was like, hey, it's $3,500. What's it worth it to you? I think it's worth here. And they're like, yeah, definitely ain't worth $3,500 for 15 minutes. Thanks for calming me down. I can't tell you how many times we get thank yous. Thank you for not charging me money. You bet. Right? That's the cool part about focusing on value is you get to have that conversation with the clients before you do the work. What would the average of an attorney have done there? Heck yeah, I can do a motion to enforce. Your ex is a son of a B. Let's do this, right? I'll get a motion to enforce. It'll be sent over to you in the next week. They don't tell them how much it costs. And then they do the work and they send it to the client. And the client's like, yeah, I love everything you put in there. Like, thanks for saying he's such a horrible person. He's like, yeah, no problem. I'm happy to say these things for you. And then they file it in the court. They go up to the hearing. The guy gets a slap on the wrist, but at least like they feel emotionally vindicated. And then they get that invoice for $3,500 and they're like, whoa, that was $3,500 for 15 minutes. And they're pissed. One of the things you have to learn with client satisfaction is when they pay in relationship to when you do the work matters. So if someone pays for a service before you've done the work, they are comparing the price to the solution. And so getting your kid back from Egypt is worth way more than $3,500. After you do the work, if that's when they pay, now they're comparing the price to the work that they saw you do, their perceived number, right? So then it's like, oh, all you did was draft a motion. You probably had a template. It only took you 30 minutes, and which we know it took longer, but they don't know that. All you did was use a template for a motion. Then you show up for an hour hearing, and that's $3,500, and they're pissed. Exact same price, exact same outcome. One gives you a happy client, one gives you an unhappy client. Who here would prefer happy clients over unhappy clients? This is not a hypothetical question. I want you to write happy or unhappy in the chat, because to me, that matters. To me, I want my clients happy. And so I had to learn that just because it's uncomfortable for me to have a conversation with my client about price, it's worth it, because they need to understand this stuff at the right time and pay for it at the right time so that they are happy. So talk to them about the price beforehand so that they can decide. Because once they decide if it's worth it or not, they then, yeah, Lisa says happy. Thank you. Thank you for responding. Yes. So it's our moral obligation to get paid for our work up front so that our clients are happy, because they deserve to be happy, right? And so how to do this, there's lots of programs out there on how to communicate this stuff with people. Greg asked, what systems do we use? Go High Level is my favorite, and I can send you a link if you want to try it out. We've got a little link that'll give you a free trial on it. And full disclosure, Go High Level pays me some money when I give you that link. So you get a free trial and I get some money, and the cost to you is nothing, right? Perfect example of a value equation, right? You get a free trial. Cost to you doesn't change whether you use my link or not. The cost is the same, and I get paid, right? It's a win for everybody. That's why I use it, right? So that's really the sum of value. I want you to take a little bit of time to kind of wrap this all up into some action steps of what you should do next. When it comes to value, first, you have to understand who your ideal client is. Not everybody values the same services the same way. And so you need to get clear on who your ideal client is so we can get clear on what they value, what's valuable to them. So start with who's your ideal client, and then think about the problems that they have. People often ask me, like, should I niche down into a specific practice area? And my answer is maybe. What I think you should do, I definitely think you should niche down, but I think you should niche down into a specific ideal client and then solve their problems with whatever practice areas you're good at. And if your ideal client has problems in things that you're not good at, then you build really good referral sources for those things, right? So before I hired Paul, I referred all of the criminal stuff out to a good friend of mine. I've never done criminal. I never will do criminal. But a lot of family law stuff has domestic violence, that especially when your ideal client is protecting children. And so I came up with a really good referral source for that. Ideally, though, you'd have a system like we have now, where the clients have a problem and we solve all their problems. And so niche down to your specific client and to the problems that they have. Your sales problems will all go away. Your marketing problems will all go away. If you know who your ideal client is, you know what problem they have, and then you relay that message in front of them. That's what it's going to take. Then the last thing is deliver. We really do need to be delivering on what we say. And so we can promise people the world, but if we can't deliver what we promised, then you're going to have a lot of unhappy clients on the back end. And I think everybody here has worked with a company at some point where you can say, man, their sales pitch was awesome. I paid them, $5,000 or $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, whatever it is. I paid them all this money, and 6 months later, I didn't get what I wanted. Right. And then you're almost more angry, because when people deceive you, you get mad. Your clients are the same way. And so deliver on that. But it's more than just actually delivering. The most important part of this is communicating that you're delivering it. So there's a story about the New York subway and how they spent all this money increasing the speed of their trains so that they would get from stop to stop faster and faster. And no one was happy. Like, the amount of client satisfaction didn't go up when they spent all of this money on there. And then they put a little sign in there that showed you when the train was coming and when it would be here for the next stop, so that the perceived, like, someone could get to the stop and look and be like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I can go to the bathroom. And they could do things and they could whatever without worrying about missing their train. So it wasn't about how fast the train actually got there. It was about them understanding and knowing when the train would be there. That perceived speed, perceived value was significantly more important to the people riding the train or the subway, whatever you want to call it, than the actual speed of the train. The same reason why we have mirrors and elevators is because people like to look at themselves. And when they're looking at themselves, they don't realize how long it takes for the elevator to go up and down. The same thing is true with your services. You need to deliver good results. And even more importantly, you need to make sure the client perceives that value, which you can only do if you understand their problems. So I had a very difficult conversation with a client yesterday who lost custody of her children. That sucks, right? No one here wants to lose custody of their children. And I had to talk to her about that. What does that look like? How can we help you get through this? With her, there actually have been a lot of changes. So we've been working with her for the last year on getting her life set up in such a way that she could get custody of her children back. And she's there now. And then I had to have the conversation on what all of that was going to cost. And that sucked. She didn't have the money for the services we were going to do. And I literally walked her through all of the different options. There's some low bono options here in Utah. So I referred her to those. I referred her to the free clinics. I referred her to everything. And ultimately she came back and said, you know what? My husband and I, this is important to us. You've shown us the correct path. And even though we don't have the money, this is so important to us. We want to do it anyways. And they'd come up with some debt and borrowing some money from some family and friends. And it was so worth it to them that they did it anyways. That's because we explain the value to them. And then you can guarantee every step of the way, we're going to be helping them. Now, this gal, I've been helping them for a year already. And every time I help them understand, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is how it fits into the bigger picture. This is how it helps you get what you want. I'm always helping them understand where we are in the journey and focusing them back on the desired outcome. Because just like a fat kid wants to get skinny, right? And every time I go run, I don't want to run. I never want to run. And guess what? I do want to eat the cookies. And I have to be reminded, hey, by not doing that this time or by doing this time, the desired result's there, right? Keeping me focused on the desired result and helping me ignore the pain of no cookies and running until I get there. Here's my challenge for you is, do you truly know who your ideal client is? I challenge you this week to block off some time on your calendar, whether it's 30 minutes or 4 hours, I don't care how long, to really spend some time thinking about who is your ideal client. I can guarantee that you will get more value out of that time getting clear on who your ideal client is than any other activity you can do. I had a mentor spend $50,000 one time for a 3-day event. And the only thing they talked about that entire 3-day event was the first day, the entire day, who's your ideal client? The second day, what problem do they have? And the third day, how do you solve that problem? That was it. 3 full days of people making millions of dollars a year. And they spent an entire day thinking about this. The fact that they made, many of those people in that room were making 10 million a year or more, I can guarantee their time from an objective standpoint is worth more than yours. And they still spent an entire day thinking about this. So you devoting 30 minutes or 4 hours or however long you want to take to really get clear on who's your ideal client, I guarantee will provide more value than anything else you do. So if you need help with that, I'm happy to hop on a call. So as always, my offer at the end of these lives, if you come to this live and you are watching this and you get to the end, I think it's only fair that I give you a little bit of my time to help you with this. So if you're going through that, if you have spent some time thinking about your ideal client and you want some help getting clarity on that, just let me know, send me a message, and I will send you a calendar link to book some time with me. We'll go through it together. So thank you guys for attending. If you have anything else, just let me know. But in the meantime, good luck, and we'll see you next week.